Well, it's that time of year again. As the autistic pony, whether I like it or not, that means I have to do something like I did last year. And boy, do I have something today. We're going to talk about one lightning sword. Okay, I can't blame you for that. But no, I'm talking about the fanfiction writer, Lightning Sword. He's the guy who wrote One Bad Cult, Phantom of the Everfree. The fic of his I'll be covering today, Pride of the Apples. He wrote the Steam series. Yeah. Although, to be fair, for second-person main 6 shipping stories, they're really good second-person main 6 shipping stories. However, as much as I did think they were good, for all intended purposes, they do get the attention they deserve, and I review underappreciated works. Besides, his personal favorite work of mine, Pride of the Apples, not only has an autistic character in it, hence why I'll be reviewing it for this year's Autism Day, but quite possibly, it's one of my favorite autistic stories of all time. Let's see why. The story of Pride of the Apples takes place in a minor alternate universe. By that I mean, it's a story that, while clearly not canon with the show, tries its best to make it seem like it could plausibly happen one day. Like having an unknown brother appear out of the blue. Point taken. So in this story, Applejack has another brother who was born between herself and Applebloom, named Calvios, or Cal for short, who is autistic. Which, is it weird to say I've known, and even know, a few Cals with this Cal's form of autism? Why do I have a sneaky feeling it's soon going to become a trope name like Max is starting to become for high-functioning Aspies? While I heard Lightning Sword base his story on his own experience with his autistic brother, the name, Calvios, is actually something Apple-related. Alcohol-related to be precise. But then again, if Applejack's name can be based on a way of making apple cider, I'm okay with this. Back to the actual story, the reason why we never heard about Cal was because shortly after the now more plausible Apple family death,
oh, Sugar Cube, if Mom and Dad were here, they'd be so proud of you.
Being unable to handle Cal's disability, they sent him off to a special school in Philadelphia to get him the education he needed. I know what you're thinking, but more on that in just a bit. Flash forward to the show's present, and Ponyville is getting ready for the Eclipse celebration. Cause who doesn't love a pony party?
Parties, festivals, gatherings, what have you is all Ponyville ever does anymore. I mean, seriously, don't they have better things to do than celebrate something every day?
Which also happens to be the week Cal's teacher decides he should spend time with his family, even though Applejack is busy with the celebration.
You know, the more I think about it, she has planned all sorts of events and parties in Ponyville. I guess she was the right pony for the job.
Why do I now just realize she was probably talking about Applejack instead of Pinkie Pie for that bit? Well, with all this going on, and with how Cal can be, when the story begins, all Applejack wants to do is get him home without drawing any attention. Of course, through what Rarity calls the grapevine effect, Applejack runs into her friends before she can make it. They try to meet Cal, with less than promising first results. However, after Twilight does a little research, she agrees to let her friends meet and help out with her brother, all the while battling with some inner turmoil about the situation she's had since a filly. Going in, I had two great hopes and fears of what to expect with this. And that would be, there is an autistic character in it, but they're, at best, secondary characters that have a few scenes which serve no more purpose than to create some conflict when needed. Thankfully, this story is just about a sibling dealing with an autistic brother, and sticks to it. Most of the conflict in this story is about Applejack dealing with some rather deep emotions she's had about Cal since fallhood. Whether it been how she felt injustice whenever Cal wasn't punished when he did something that would easily get herself or Big Mac grounded, to some feelings of shame. I know. Harsh much?
I wish it were you in the building instead of him.
But here it actually kind of works. Remember that part where I said they sent him off to a special school far away? Well, I know of a lot of other stories that would have either had it made a bad thing or simply having a premise more like Asylum. Rottenberg ringing any bells? Here, however, is looked at as a rather maturely hard choice that clearly wasn't easy for anyone to make, but in the end was the best option. The same could be said for Applejack especially. She could have easily just been made a bad guy until she learns her lesson with her resentment or, heck, even hatred towards Cal at some parts. Instead, she's just shown as a character placed in a bad situation, and showing how one would likely act in her shoes. A lot of which comes down to the execution, and not just having shame or anger be her only emotion towards Cal till the end. She can also be happy around him. Protective, sad, nervous, conflicted. She goes back and forth on what the given situation is. For example, when Twilight first suggests them helping her with Cal, instead of just being one note and have it because she doesn't want Cal to shame her, it's also because she cares about him, and doesn't want him to get hurt either. It's just how anyone would likely feel in her situation. Though it's not just her, but how everyone in this story interacts and spends time with Cal that really sells the story. The other thing I had worried going in was that Cal would get along too well with every pony except for Applejack. Though once again, his reaction with everyone is handled very well. Even with all the research Twilight puts into it, things still go wrong, mistakes are made, and not every scene ends well. However, while Cal doesn't instantly click with everyone, through some good pacing and execution, he is able to open up a little and find a few characters he does like on the spot. However, it just won't be because of no good reason. It would have also been because one of them did something different than the other. And then there's Cal, who, I'm just gonna say it, is easily one of my favorite autistic characters of all time. Being set up as what would be considered a medium-low functioning autistic, he's the type that has trouble using words correctly, very sensitive to sound and touch, likes to repeat whatever is spoken, while oftentimes being oblivious to his environment because he doesn't know any better, or is fixated on something else, which also makes teaching him very difficult. With that said, it's not all about the negative aspects. He has his own personality that's fitting, likable, but again, still fits in with the autism. And while it's not easy for him to learn, it's not impossible. And when he does actually learn something, it sticks. Plus, we do see him show a great deal of love for those he cares about. My favorite scenes are when he'll apologize for something. It may not necessarily be his fault, but if he senses someone he cares about is distressed because of him, he'll say he's sorry, which was something that didn't come naturally to him, but had to be learned for several years. Of course, none of that was as great as this one scene at a party where pre-lost Mark Diamond Tiara has to show up. Well, I won't spoil what happens, but with how it played out, it kind of actually made Cal a bit of a badass. And if you just want to say he didn't know any better, it's still rather enjoyable and makes you like him all the more. Though was it just me, or did said chapter also hint at something more between him and Scootaloo? A character with a mental handicap paired with a physical handicap. Speaking of, the way the story tells autism is pretty good too. Most of which is brought on with how Cal and those around him grow and learn from the experience. This isn't just some story going, this is what autism is, but it also managed to fit in what someone can do about it, while not being preachy or feeling distracted from the story itself. If I did have a problem, without hopefully spoiling too much, I would say that part of the second to last chapter and resolution feels a bit cheesy. I wouldn't say it was horrible. In fact, I'd say it was a rather satisfying conclusion. Besides, it wasn't just Ern. Everyone had a struggle to reach this conclusion, including Cal, especially since it doesn't chicken out with its final chapter.
Oh, Sugar Cube, if Mom and Dad were here, they'd be so proud of you.
Oh, thanks, Applejack.
I'm not sure what to say, except go check it out. It might not click with everyone if you're not that familiar or easily offended by anything portraying autism, but I think most people who have dealt in one way or another with ASD and most casual viewers will still find this story worth your time. So with that, the only other bad thing is that it's a fanfiction novel, which I can't see many parents or non-bronies logging into fanfiction just to check out.